Shadow football. What a difference a week makes. The 3-3 Conti Cup audition midweek perhaps gave us a sign of what the big show could offer at 3 Point Lane. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Fresh off a 4-0 and 7-0 defeat in the WSL by the two Manchester clubs, all signs pointed towards an emphatic Arsenal victory given their morale-boosting 4-1 win over Chelsea last weekend. Tottenham, however, rewrote the script and pulled off a massive 1-0 win for the first time ever in the WSL against their old North London foes. So how did they do it? How did Spurs hang on for the narrow but very deserved win? And how did Arsenal not put the ball in the back of the net after 31 shots? Tottenham make it no secret that they defend in a low block, a very organised 4-4-2, retreating whilst keeping their shape and pouncing as soon as there is a loose touch or pass from the opposition. This requires a lot of work from the two forwards and the wingers, with the forwards tasked with putting pressure on the centre-backs and the wingers having to track back and double up with their fullback to nullify the threat of the Arsenal wingers. The two central midfielders need to have constant communication about their positioning. If one of them loses their position, a team like Arsenal can punish them with their attacking quality. When they are attacking, Robert Villahamn wants his team to play out from the back and build up the pitch. Spurs tend to play the ball directly into the central midfielders or wingers, often with them facing towards their own goal. The midfielder or winger would then have three options: pass the ball back, turn away from the opposition and then find a pass, or pass it wide to a winger or fullback. This is an extremely risky tactic, because if Arsenal just put a player on the ball receiver and have them aggressively try to win the ball back, then they've successfully shut down the Tottenham build-up. And they did that. Ideally, as a midfielder, you want to receive the ball facing the way you're attacking, so you can scan the pitch looking for passing options before you've received the ball. Villaham's insistence on playing this style of football is commendable, but it often leaves his side in suicidal situations where they leave their back four exposed because Arsenal have pressed their midfield and won the ball back. Had they not wasted every single chance they had, the scoreline could have been very different. Without any context, if I said Spurs played a lot of dangerous passes, you'd most likely think Spurs carved through Arsenal repeatedly through their intricate passing. But what I really mean is, Spurs played a lot of dangerous passes into their midfielders and wingers, often with the risk of losing the ball in a dangerous area. Now, this is not a new tactic in football, but what Villaham's tactics have instilled in this team is a very important element called trust. Even when their tactic doesn't work, the team still trusts one another. The midfield and wingers did manage to turn away from the defenders a number of times, with Grace Clinton and Celine Bizet doing extremely well to keep possession. I want to show this passage of play to give you an idea of how Spurs want to play. Bizet wins the ball on the right hand side. Thomas plays a dangerous ball to Graham, who almost loses it if not for Petzlberger's intervention. Neville drives up the left hand side and passes the ball back to Graham. This might not look like much, but Neville's run up the left-hand side has moved her whole team roughly 30 metres up the pitch. Arsenal are now pushed back into their own half, and Bartrip has the ball here without much pressure on her. Beth England drops deep, draws in Ilestedt from the defence and Pelova from the midfield. This position that England takes up between the defence and midfield lines means Pelova cannot ignore England, and thus isn't able to press Graham. Pelova is essentially in no man's land here because she's caught between two options, with Manum not really doing her job to close down Graham as well. Arsenal still remain in shape, but it's Tottenham's movement off the ball that manipulates the attention of the Arsenal players that creates space for the teammates that are on the ball. As Graham spreads the ball out to the right hand side, take a look at Petzlberger, who quietly had a pretty good game. She makes a run into this space, which occupies the attention of two women at the same time, something I've never done before. Leah Valti and Steph Catley take notice of her. Valti is a step behind Petzlberger and should be goal side of her. Catley, noticing her midfielder isn't really in a position to close down Petzlberger, has two people to mark, and leaves Bizet, the last player you want to leave this much space to have a run at her and give her an attempt at a cross in the box. The cross is poor, but this is a signal of intent of how Spurs want to play, and they can do it. They have the quality to do so. Beth England came off at halftime and was replaced by Jessica Naz. Their attack then changed a bit since Naz has more pace than England, and Spurs used her pace as an outlet to stretch their attack wider and carry the ball. They often targeted this kind of area when they're trying to get the ball to Nez. Grace Clinton is an exciting young player, and what impressed me the most about her in this game is her ability to play on the turn. Time and time again, she would be given these difficult passes to deal with, but she seemed to always dribble her way out of trouble using her fancy feet and strength. She's great at receiving the ball and turning on her first touch to give herself a yard of space, and her teammates clearly see this quality in her. And the amount of trust they have in her to give her the ball in these situations shows how valuable she is to her teammates. And it was Clinton's ability combined with Naz's pace that had a hand in the only goal of the game. This was a really beautiful build-up by Spurs, and I'm slightly in love with this goal. Kit Graham receives one of many dangerous balls played into her this game, but found herself without an Arsenal player close behind her. She plays a good ball to Neville, and take a look at where Victoria Pelova is. She was the one closing down Graham and Bartrip whilst Marnham is cutting off the passing lane to Turner. Pelova drops off, covering both options, and allows her to pass the ball wide to Neville. Beth Mead, at this point, needs to start running out to her wing to cover Neville. She doesn't, and Katie McCabe is then forced to close down Neville, dragging her away from her right back position. Clinton's ability to play on the turn is amazing, and her team trusts her, so they give her the ball in a tough situation. And what does the 2028 Ballon d'Or winner Grace Clinton do? Clinton takes a brilliant touch inwards with grace and draws Ilestedt, who was actually nominated for the 2023 Ballon d'Or, so far away from her position and plays the ball to Martha Thomas, cutting out Petzelberger in the process. Had this ball gone to Petzelberger, Valti would have closed it down, but instead, it goes directly to Thomas, who is behind Valti, and Thomas has acres of space in front of her to drive forward. Spurs have successfully gotten in behind the Arsenal midfield. This angle shows the positions that the Arsenal players are in after Tottenham's manipulation. This would be the ideal positions the Arsenal defenders would want to be in. Mead should be on Neville. McCabe would then be able to press Clinton, and Ilestedt can return to playing as a centre-back. Thomas does the sensible thing and passes the ball immediately to Bizet. Had she carried the ball further, that would have given Walty an opportunity to chase her down. Plus, Bizet is quicker and a better dribbler. Look at where Jess Naz is. She starts out wide and then makes a darting run in behind Catley. This is a very selfless run as she is essentially running to where Bizet is going, but she makes this run to grab Lotte Wubben-Moy's attention to drag her out of position. Lia Valti over here now has two options: double up on Bizet and stop her cutting inside, or stay in position and watch Thomas. And like her country Switzerland, she remains neutral, so she does neither. Valti allows Bizet to pass the ball inside, and Martha Thomas finishes the move off with a very, very well taken goal. Tottenham have manipulated the Arsenal shape so much through their passing and off-the-ball movement that it took them 3 forward passes to cut through the whole Arsenal team. Zinsberger stood a yard or two too far out for this goal. Had she stayed closer to her line, she would have had about half a second more time to react and attempt to dive to try and save it, but because she was slightly off her line, she ended up rooted to the spot, not even attempting to dive for it because she couldn't react on time. Tottenham plays some gorgeous football in the opposition half, but the real issue, and this is a big issue, is getting there. Too often were they caught in possession by playing these dangerous passes into their midfield in their own half. This is something Wilhelm needs to sort out as soon as possible, because teams are starting to figure out his playing style now. If he wants to avoid these kinds of defeats in the future, he needs to think of something fast, because this is not a sustainable way to exit your own half. Speaking of the 4-0 and 7-0 double axing of the Spurs by the Manchester teams, out of the 11 goals conceded, 7 of them were from crosses into the box. Remarkably, 6 of the goals conceded out of 7 against Oil Money FC were from crosses. Add on the 3 goals they conceded against Arsenal in the midweek showing that were also from crosses, that makes it 10 goals conceded out of a combined total of 14 from crosses in the last 3 games prior to this one. So far this season in the WSL, Tottenham have conceded 20 goals. 10 of them were from crosses, and a further 2 from corners, meaning they failed to deal with deliveries into the box 12 times this season in the WSL. Eidevall clearly saw this as a weakness and an invitation, so Arsenal proceeded to send in about 62,375 crosses into the box. However, what Jonas didn't realize is that Robert Wilhelm saw this as well, and has clearly worked on defending crosses in training with his team, and that definitely showed this game. Spurs defended like demons in their own box, heading everything away and putting as many bodies in the box as they can. Their defenders were always in the correct position to clear or just get in the way of the oncoming Arsenal forwards. Organisation is the key here, and the back four were always aligned and did a very good job of nullifying the aerial threat of Alessia Russo. The midfield would often drop back and help, which just adds more Spurs bodies that Arsenal has to get through to get to the ball. This one here is my favourite clearance. Amy Turner bravely puts her head where most players would be scared to even put their foot, and wow, what clearance that is. As good as Tottenham's defending was, Arsenal crossed the ball in 26 times, and I'd say about 23 of those crosses were what's the word I'm looking for? Not good enough. The accuracy of Arsenal's crosses resembles my dart skills when I'm about 20 pints in. Too often were the deliveries too low, too high, to no one, behind their own players. It felt forced, it really did. A ball this high and slow gives an organised defence time to judge the flight of the ball and head away. And if Arsenal do win the header, you'd have to generate so much power from your neck muscles to even challenge the keeper because the ball is so slow. They just couldn't find their own players in the box. Ford crossed more off her left foot than her right, which just adds to the statistic. And I'd say this was probably the best cross of the game, ironically delivered by the woman you want at the end of these crosses, Alessia Russo. Russo, a former winger, delivers this ball with pace. And even though this is a slightly awkward height for Miedema, she managed to get away from the defender and was able to attempt a decent shot at goal. It was a pretty decent effort, honestly. Unfortunately for Arsenal, this just wasn't the way to go. Aside from the crosses, Arsenal were poor in their execution and decision-making in attack whenever they won the ball from the Spurs midfield. Russo should have played Manum in here. Instead, she tries to look for Ford, but Bueller has that passing lane covered. Over here, Valti wins the ball and Manum looks for Ford. I don't have too much to say about this other than this is pretty good defending by Spurs and a complete lack of patience from Ford. Or here, Manum reads the pass, but her first two touches let her down as Graham is then able to recover and put pressure on her. The pass to Ford out wide here is on, since Turner has her back turned to her, and would then mean that she'd have to swing her hips around 180 degrees to track Ford. She doesn't play the pass, cuts back to her right foot, and this is great by Molly Bartrip. She drops back covering the pass to Russo, and once Neville has raced back into position to mark Russo, Manum is then caught in two minds, and that gives Bartrip enough time to close down Manum effectively and block the shot. That was pretty much the story for Arsenal really. Not good enough. They rushed chances, shots from outside the box were often straight at Votikova, they were selfish in possession, took the wrong decisions, and most importantly, came up against a very resilient Spurs defence. They worked tirelessly in defence, and I thought they defended heroically. Ashley Neville was brilliant, she shut Mead down very well. Has James had a solid game at right back, and I don't think there was a blade of grass on the pitch Martha Thomas didn't cover. They kept the team shape really well, and Wilhelm must be proud of his side's work. As usual, we'll highlight a player I thought stood out in the game. The word, or phrase rather, that I'm going to use to describe Alessia Russo is that she is a chick magnet, and that chick is Molly Bartrip. The reason why Russo wasn't able to get into the game was because Bartrip marked her so tightly throughout the whole game. Even one of Russo's strengths, her hold-up game when her back is turned to goal, was ineffective because Bartrip kept getting a foot in and disrupting the ball. She did not leave Russo's side this game, always keeping an eye on her, and she was imperious in the air as well, heading everything away and put in a very, very commanding performance. Eidevall would not be happy with this performance, especially after such a confident win against Chelsea last week, and will go into the winter break wondering what went wrong and possibly looking to bring a couple of new faces in. As for Wilhelm and Spurs, they can walk away from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with their heads held high, fully confident in their playing style and tactics going into the new year. If Beth England and Martha Thomas find a way to gel together as a strike partnership, then this Tottenham side could really be one to look out for the rest of the season.